This is Kevin for crackberry.com.
Hey, it's Phil from Android Central.
Derek from Pre-Central.
Daniel from WP Central.
And Renee from Tippy, and welcome to Mobile Nations, where the heads of state of Android, BlackBerry, WebOS, Windows Phone, and iOS get together to tell each other that we're all wrong.
No,
Pretty much.
No, you're wrong.
No, you're wrong.
So wrong.
So it's a big week. We usually try to go in alphanumerical, magical, whatever order, but Dan is literally in a cab, on a bike, on his way, in a plane, taking a kayak to England. So we're going to let him go first. And I think he's going to explain to us why it took Mango to Tango, Dan.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, we've had a big week with Windows Phone. We just hit our 1-year anniversary, which is, it was kind of a nice thing. I think we've come a long way in 1 year with Mango now. Nearing 50% devices have it, and update is basically going full stream for everybody. And I think Microsoft's done a really good job getting that update out there, 500 new features. And so, as great as that is, and it is, I mean, it's a huge accomplishment, we're already moving on to the next phase, which is this week I'm on my way to London to Nokia World. So it was about 7 months ago, we were in Barcelona, Mobile World Congress, and it was just announced that Nokia and Microsoft had a deal to basically become exclusive partners with each other. And here we are now. We're going to see finally what they've been up to for the last 7 months. So we're expecting a few, about 2 to 3 Nokia Windows phones to be shown and basically handed out and go on sale within the next couple of weeks. So it's a big deal. Then we move on to Skype coming to Windows Phone, as well as the rest of the ecosystem. And then finally Tango, the next update, will probably be announced, I imagine, at CES or perhaps Mobile World Congress in February. So we're just steamrolling ahead.
But wait, Nokia, they make like Symbian and Migo and whatever phones. They're making Windows phones now. I've been out of the loop. I'm sorry, Dan.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the story, but like Palm, they've run into sort of a roadblock with their operating system, and they basically chose a new path to go down the road. They were going to go with Android or Windows Phone, and it was a big change for them, obviously. They decided to go with Microsoft and Windows Phone, mostly because it was an area that was left undefined yet. It was still an area where there could be lots of growth, and they could really stake their position in. Android, on the hand,
nobody gave a crap about Symbian and especially Migo anywhere other than, I mean, not that like Europe is a small market, but I mean, let's face it, they weren't getting traction with those, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, they had traction previously, but their market share was rapidly declining. They were sort of where BlackBerry is at this point with RIM and their operating system, where they really had a large segment of the market. They were the leader, but they just waited too long, and they were declining faster. And Android and the iPhone were just quickly eating into their territory. And although they're still huge, they still have massive production capacity. They were needed to do something drastic. And for a lot of people, this was, I mean, it's almost unheard of, because years ago, Nokia and Microsoft were at each other's throats. Same thing with Qualcomm and Nokia. We've talked about this before. And now it's just a completely different scenario.
Dan, it's so confusing because now you have a guy from Microsoft running Nokia. You're going to have spectacular hardware. You're going to have an incredibly elegant operating system. And I'm not going to have anything to make fun of anymore. I'm very depressed.
It's bizarre. I mean, even I wake up sometimes, and it's just a strange world that Microsoft is really turned around so much. Windows 8 is getting strong applause from lots of people. It's really a different company now, mostly because they really are listening to their users. For instance, Windows 8's already come out with the developer preview. There's been some criticism about certain things with the start menu and how things operate, and they've already said, we hear you, we're making these changes, and it's really a dynamic system, and Windows Phone is exactly like that. There's been some push to have a homebrew community, but every time we try to ask for something or do something, you guys should do this, they end up doing it. And with the Mango update and adding 500 features, they really went a long way in filling in a lot of user requests. And so the company, it feels very different. They have like a new mojo, and it's unusual to see them having an elegant UI, a robust ecosystem, and everything just working for them. And I think it's a bright future for Microsoft.
You can't say mojo because Derek's got that trademarked, right?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And what about all Kevin's stories about Microsoft buying RIM, Kev? It sounds like they found their own destiny.
They did, and it didn't include RIM.
Does that make you sad? Does it make you sad that they're going to have stainless steel phones that work?
No, RIM's going to do it on their own. We don't need anybody's help, so that's okay. We're We're like Apple. We own end-to-end software and hardware. None of this tag teaming stuff.
Or like
We just-
Palm.
Yeah, it worked really well for Palm. And then
Yeah.
I'm just saying you could go either way. The end-to-end thing is probably ends up giving you the best device. I mean, I think Apple has shown that, RIM has proven that, and Palm definitely proved that. But it's a dangerous, market too, because Palm's problem was that they couldn't meet capacity for the market. They couldn't get enough devices out there and differentiate themselves enough rapidly, and that just comes down to capital. They just didn't have enough. RIM is probably in a little better position, but you get companies like Nokia now and HTC, Samsung, Apple. These are some massive companies, and it's really difficult, I think, to compete with them. So it's going to be an interesting challenge, I think, to see what happens.
There was this interesting quote yesterday. The Steve Jobs biography finally came out, and there was this interchange between him and Bill Gates where, Bill Gates said, I guess the integrated model does work sometimes, but you need a Steve Jobs to make it happen. And do you think that's going to be the ticket with Nokia, is that Nokia can sort of be that Steve Jobs role and kind of force the integration of the parts?
Possibly. I mean, Windows Phone right now actually operates pretty well, considering we have, now we have about 13 to 14 devices total in the market. And because they have minimum hardware specs and they control it, not as tight as Apple, but much more tighter than Android, the user experience has been very consistent across devices. Sure, there's a little bit of differentiation here and there, but for the most part, it's pretty well integrated. And I think with this update, they actually shown that they can push out a unified update across many devices, not as fast as Apple, but much faster than Android. Once again, it's the middle-of-the-road approach, and I think it's pretty good. Nokia, though, definitely...
Not necessarily faster, but more consistent and keep that same sort of integration and same look and feel across devices.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you could pick up any of these phones, and I have like 7 of them, and they all feel exactly the same. I mean, they're all going to be like there's little differences here and there, but for the most part, it's the same experience, and it's really nice. Nokia, though, their cameras are unmatched. I think, their hardware is always just top notch, and they're a great partner for Microsoft because Microsoft did need that. Samsung is really good. I really like them. HTC does a lot of great stuff, but Nokia is that extra. It brings it to the Apple level of, I think, hardware quality. And one thing Windows Phone really needs is a standout device right now. We have a lot of
Nokia
great
fanboys.
devices. Yeah. But we just don't have like that one phone, that Droid moment where, it really wows everybody. I'm not really positive that these first generation Nokia devices will be that, but they're going to definitely set the stage for it later on, I think.
Microsoft hasn't gotten enough credit either for this update, I think. I mean, look at where they came from, which was nothing, which was, the update feature in Windows Mobile just being a joke. And it was a joke that they left in. And then, remember, I was with Dan at the launch event a year ago, and I was thinking about that this past week. I can't believe it's been a year. And that was one of the first things I went to was the update screen. I'm like, all right, are we going to see it work?
Yeah, we're going to see this work, right.
And damned if they didn't have an update, and damned if it didn't go well. That's been a big problem on the Android side right now is these phones will get updated, and the updates won't necessarily fail, but because of the way Android is partitioned and the way the partitions work and the folders and the whatever, it's just been a mess. And we've had people complaining very publicly that this update didn't brick my phone, but it made it slow down, and it's just working like crap now.
The one thing that Daniel wanted to mention, Phil, and he gave me a link to it, is yet another Android ODM has signed a licensing agreement with Microsoft. So Dan is now making more money from your phones than you are, Phil. Again.
I believe
why am I still doing all the work then?
I believe TechCrunch crunched the numbers, and they actually showed that I think 53% of like the devices on the market now of Android are like paying royalties down to Microsoft. And
and people keep saying like Microsoft is extorting people, and maybe they are. I don't know. I haven't read the.
Have you seen Bomber?
Yeah, well, that's the big difference, right? I mean, if it's legit, and in fact, Android, and Chrome, so this is shared code somewhere, is using other companies' patents, be it Microsoft or whoever, then they should absolutely have to license it. That's the way it works. If it's something a little more, and Microsoft is saying, "Hey, you infringed on our patent," don't worry about what they are. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. Give us money. We won't sue you. It's protection. That's what it is. Then that's another thing. But I think people need to be a little careful about just completely bashing Microsoft for something that could be totally legit. I don't know. I haven't read.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because obviously Microsoft isn't it's far from the only company claiming Android has,
Right.
other intellectual property in it. And so they're not alone. This Apple, of course, is very, especially recently with the Steve Jobs.
But the difference,
comments from
Dan, is
Cloud.
that Microsoft will take money. Apple won't. They actually
Right.
want Phil to remove features. You want to make
Yeah.
Android more expensive. We want to make it uglier.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a very different approach between Apple and Microsoft. Microsoft's like, if you want to use our technology, fine. Just, give us a fair compensation, and we'll work out a deal. Apple, though, is very much on the opposite. They're like, we invented this technology, and it's their right as a patent holder to be like, we do not want to share this or license it. And so that's the deal. They don't want to settle with HTC. They just want those features removed. Doesn't mean necessarily it'll get uglier. I mean, HTC is a big company now. They can innovate around this stuff, and they've said as much that they will. But it's a very different approach where Microsoft actually is fine with Android being out there. They're just like, you just got to pay for it. And, I think it's an important distinction. Plus, we will see what the courts say. I mean, Motorola is fighting this. Amazon is fighting this. And so these are going to go through the courts, and we'll see who comes out, the winner. Although it seems like the analysis so far is Motorola will eventually lose these patent cases against Microsoft.
The thing that's killing me right now is watching the smug look on Derek and Kevin's face because they know they're just totally immune to any of this because they sit on patents for everything.
That's
It's
so
much
true.
fun.
Yeah,
I'm just biting my tongue, and I'm like, just wait until 2012, and I get my QNX phones and BBX phones. We're gonna crush everybody.
He's going to sue us. No, Apple will never be allowed to make a keyboard again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be real fun to see in the next year what happens. Microsoft is on a very tight schedule for these updates. We already know about Tango. There's actually supposed to be two Tangos, Tango 1, Tango 2. One is supposed to be for low-end phones for developing markets.
Dan, hold on. Did you just say that it takes two to tango?
No, I said there are two Tango updates. Then there's Tango 2, and supposedly new resolutions may be introduced with these. And then we move on to Apollo. Apollo is Windows Phone 8, so that's going to be, a big upgrade change, and we're expecting that late 2012. And so they have a very tight schedule, and I think we'll definitely see Windows Phone and Windows Desktop merge by Windows 9. I think that's really the goal.
What I found was odd is that, Microsoft's been doing these steady lists of upgrades. Kevin finally has his Devcon, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and Phil couldn't let him enjoy it. Not only because Kevin had like a 4-hour keynote. Phil, you decided to go, I think, from 1 in the morning till 3 in the morning the next night. You had the longest live blog in the history of live blogs. You announced a phone in the morning and obsoleted it by the afternoon.
Yeah, basically. let Kevin talk about his little thing, and then I'll talk about it longer.
No, I was gonna say the timing actually worked out really well for RIM because I think it's pretty widely acknowledged now that last week's DevCon was a big bust as far as announcements go. So I think having Android do big news that day and having Apple miss earnings that day, all the noise in the mobile space actually kind of helped RIM get away with it. I think there were a lot of big TV cameras there at the keynote at DevCon. So people were obviously looking for RIM to announce something big. It didn't happen. There was some, there were articles out there kind of razzing on RIM, but I don't think it was the extent that it could have been.
Well, why didn't we get
thanks
the
to the
phones,
other
Kevin?
news going on.
Why? I wanted you to have a phone. I was hoping you'd have a phone.
So there were phones there, guaranteed. They just weren't shown to the public. They were, probably sitting in Mike Lazaridis' suite, getting shown to partners all week. Because that's what they're doing, and they decided it's not quite ready for prime time. So I think CES is going to be the big unveiling of the first, BBX phones.
Couldn't they have put it in glass like the Playbook or worn it in a chain around their neck like you do?
But, RIM has to get away from that because they've kind of overpromised and underdelivered, and I think they're just deciding to learn from Apple a little bit here and not announce anything until it's much closer to being shipped. And the Playbook was different, right? That was their first tablet, totally new platform. They weren't cannibalizing any phone sales. Right now, if you showed off a BBX phone and it wasn't shipping in 2 weeks, you're gonna cut out your BlackBerry 7 smartphone sales, which RIM cannot afford to do. Last quarter, they already burned through a lot of cash, and they need to milk the BlackBerry 7 cash cow as much as they can. So, keeping QNX phones a little under wraps for now, not a bad thing.
Is BlackBerry 7 really a cash cow, though?
Well, for them it is, absolutely. And in the sense that it's pulling in the dough right now. I mean, maybe not as much profit as they want, but that's what's keeping the company going for sure. I mean, they need those phones. They're not necessarily much better than, they're better than BlackBerry 6 phones in terms of hardware and specs, overall experience, but they're not changing the BlackBerry user experience, right? It's the same basic usage, but it's making the money again. It has carriers selling it, and people are buying them, especially the 9900 and 9930. So I think I'd call it a cash cow for the company versus, throwing out a amazing next generation product to win over the masses. This is RIM making money for, 2 to 3 to 4 quarters more, hopefully, while they do release the new, the new product system.
And Derek, they actually showed off WebGL. It hurt me in my palm heart.
Yeah. It's. I was going to curl up in a ball and weep.
You're almost out-webbing all the big web companies, Kev, because they showed WebWorks, HTML5, super incredibly good support, WebGL, they're going to use it as a cross-platform, cross-BB platform thing. That's it. That's probably more than Google, more than Palm, maybe more than Apple's doing right now for web.
It feels like RIM's making a big bet on the browser being, a big part of the future of mobile, which is a little counter to the apps race. But I mean, RIM has their strategies to address that and get their, quote, tonnage that they need in the app catalog. But yeah, they're betting on the browser, and the Torch Mobile guys. Torch is a company a web browser company that Research in Motion acquired, who used to build the Iris browser for Windows Mobile. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then later Torch for Android. In fact, I saw them at CTIA.
Right, and they're super smart guys based out of Toronto, and they're basically making this all happen on the BlackBerry platform and now the BBX platform, and it's powerful. There's no doubt it's powerful. It's just a matter of how much will WebGL get embraced by developers versus just going native in apps, and it doesn't matter. But I mean, it's nice that they're supporting it. They definitely are fans of standards.
Can I defend them for a second, Kev? Because you guys got so much grief last week. People were upset about the BB outages, and we spoke before. Sidekick goes down. Sidekick was down for 2 weeks. Amazon S3 has gone down, taken off all the images from everyone's websites. Apple's Mobile Me was a fiasco. I mean, every big company goes down. And at the same time, they're announcing, we just saw the TAT Cascade, the WebWorks, the native POSIX SDK, the new version of Air. I mean, it seemed like they had so much stuff and they still got a hard time.
Well, because people want phones. People want phones on the new platform. The playbook, for all intents and purposes, is a bust as far as, sales go, units go. I mean, it's a great device, and it showcases the new platform, and it's been sort of a public beta, you could say, of the new platform, which is still shy of a few features like native email. But people want phones. I mean, there's 70 million subscribers. All but 200,000 are on the old BlackBerry or Java OS still. And, people aren't going to invest in that anymore. And probably, what was the most honestly depressing thing for me last week was, not the lack of phone announcements. Like I said, I understand why they did that. No big deal. Yes, they did some things to make developers happy. The thing that scared me the most was actually walking into the solution showcase or mobility pavilion or whatever they call it, which is the big sort of general room at these kind of BlackBerry shows, be it BlackBerry World or Devcon. And normally you have 4 or 5 rows of vendors there, partners in the ecosystem. It could be app developers, it's people selling services, enterprise services, development services, promotional services, every kind of, BlackBerry ecosystem vendor partner you can think of. And usually there's, I don't know the exact number, but it takes a while to walk through and see everybody. There's probably well over 100 sponsors who are there, and these people are buying space at these shows. I walked in this time, and there was maybe 8. We're talking like a 80% drop. And what that shows me is people are waiting for RIM to do something. They're waiting for these phones. Nobody who's a third party in this ecosystem is throwing any money at BlackBerry right now until they're more certain of BlackBerry's future. And that's what scared the bejesus out of me. Like the outage, not a big deal. People panicked. That's great. That shows people still care and rely on the platform. I would panic if BlackBerry service went down and nobody said anything, and they got away with it. Then there's trouble.
How painful. Because I was sitting in the press room, well, the Sprint Lounge at CTI, because the press room sucked, and sitting there with a bunch of other bloggers, and we were all sitting there listening to the RIM conference call, like the first emergency.
Saddest call ever.
Which started out with whoever it was running it. The woman says, "We don't have a lot of time for this. We're pretty busy right now." It was the most bizarre thing I've ever heard in my life.
That was the first press call you're talking about, right? Yeah, the second one was done a little bit better. I know all the people who are on these calls, so I'm not going to call any of them out right here.
Did you get free bumpers, Kevin? That's what I want to know. Did you get free bumpers?
No, we get free apps, actually, which is kind of interesting. So, for RIM, they came a long way, actually, on this outage, because outages are nothing new for RIM. Going back, outages in 07 and 08 and 09 are one of the things that helped grow crackberry.com as a destination website online, because when those outages happened, everybody was wondering what the heck was going on. RIM provided no information, so we were on top of it. And this time around, RIM did a little bit better because this was a long outage. I think the one back in 07 was 8 hours, and that was long, right? And that got a lot of attention.
Hang on, Kevin. Go back and explain to me what an outage means.
So basically, and it on this outage it depended where you were, but basically everything routes back through RIM's NOC. All email and goes through there. All BBM goes through there. And in this case, there was a what RIM calls a core switch failure that happened in Europe. So things email quit flowing, but that doesn't mean people quit sending. RIM fixed the problem apparently fairly quickly, but then the huge backlog of data that didn't get sent while things were down. When RIM flips the switch, they need to be very careful with that, how they start pumping it through.
The denial of service attacked themselves.
Yeah, and in this case, it cascaded through the rest of the world. So, even though it was a European problem at the source, it ended up bringing down North America, which is not cool. And, a lot has been said about this is an ongoing problem for RIM, right? They've never totally solved it. They've solved it by having better backup systems and everything else. But in this case, the failover didn't work, which has also happened before, which makes you think it's just a problem with the core architecture, actually the design of how the NOC works. It's not...
Oh, that's
it's not like QNX. It's not all microkerneled and siloed, apparently.
And it's not like Dan's Exchange server, which is like 8 billion implementations all around the world. Every neighborhood has their own one.
Yeah, pretty much. So this was a big issue, and it took days basically for service to get fully restored. So what was down was email and BBM. For some people, the web browser wasn't working. For me, when Rogers was affected in Canada, I could still browse the web. So I was still logging into my Gmail through the web browser. Some places, like in Europe, apparently, where they have a newer version of Biz, apparently people receive text messages letting them know at least things were down. In North America, that didn't happen. But RIM did post some updates to their website. They did the press conferences. And
the funniest part for me, Kev, was at how angry the analysts are, because usually they're supposed to be there representing their clients, but because almost all of them use BlackBerries, they took it as a personal time to yell about their lack of service.
Yeah, and I did a lot of interviews. I mean, that really screwed up my week. I guess it's 2 weeks ago. And I did a ton of interviews, and I did some call-in shows where people were phoning in for 30 minutes, on Ontario radio station. And it's interesting to see how varied the people are with how they deal with something like this. I'd say about 25% of the people were pretty livid, right? And those are probably the people who, won't be buying a BlackBerry on their next phone, and maybe they were already thinking like that. So it made it very easy for them to get mad. There's a lot of understanding also where people get that these things can happen. I think nobody likes when service goes down. And I think there's the question of, well, why is RIM different than, Google or iPhone with this? This wouldn't happen on those platforms. So it's still not a great, RIM hasn't given a great explanation lately of all the value of the NOC to the average customer, because the value of the NOC is slowly kind of deteriorating over time.
Hot girls using BBM, Kevin. I've said it before.
Yeah, but that's one service, I think.
Right.
Which they could run anyways with,
the only service that matters.
Yeah, and I actually, what was awesome about Devcon? I met the inventor of BBM.
Awesome.
I saw that post. That was cool.
Yeah, and what's really funny, so on Small Worlds, I've actually met him before, but this time I just, snapped a photo of him. He's actually...
You were there?
He knew, no, he's a good guy. It turns out, so my best friend that I've known since I was like 4 years old, his wife is first cousins with the guy.
All right, you're blowing my mind.
Kevin's cousin's sister's.
No,
No names,
my
no
best
names.
friend's wife's first cousin.
I'm gonna say
And apparently he wrote it when he was an intern. That's what I heard afterwards.
Smart
He wasn't
people.
even fully like a RIM employee, I think.
I'm going to segue over to Phil by just making a suggestion to RIM. If people want new phones, just call the Playbook a phone. Phil does that every day. 7 inches is nothing anymore. Just
What's up?
So Phil, you announced a Razer in the morning, and then you completely obliterated it with a Galaxy Nexus in the afternoon, and then
I did.
think
I personally announced these things from my bedroom office.
I anthropomorphized you into being Google.
Yeah, so, God, what was it, last Tuesday? At lunchtime, there was an event in New York City announcing the Droid Razr and the Motorola Active, which is basically like an iPod Nano watch, only with Android and Motorola and another $150. Yeah, that works. Well, we shall see. So that was at noon, and by all intents and purposes, this looks like a pretty badass phone, right? Except that 12 hours later in Hong Kong, Google and Samsung announced what they were going to announce in CTIA, and that is Ice Cream Sandwich and the Samsung Galaxy Nexus. So kind of blew everybody out of the water 12 hours later. Now that said, the Droid Razr will get Ice Cream Sandwich. They've already announced that. So feel bad about it if we want, but they are going to update it. So Ice Cream Sandwich, Android 4.0, kind of everything you've ever wanted in Android and more. They've brought the tracks back together. It's a combination of the tablet OS version and the phone OS version. Really good interview with Matthias Duarte, the ex-Palm guy that Josh Topolsky did, that explains a lot in how Honeycomb, and this was my guess too, is that Honeycomb was kind of their answer, like, holy crap, we got to get something out because here comes this iPad 2, and the best we have is this phone OS that's been scaled up to 7 inches right now, and it kind of sucks. So that's why they never put Honeycomb out. We knew that. So this brings everything back to the open source track, and everybody's going to be happy.
Phil, before you go on, is it fair that people wanted Matthias Duarte to make it look like WebOS, and he didn't? He left it like Android, and there's some people complaining about that?
No, yeah, I totally don't think it's fair, because A, you can't make it look like WebOS. That's just a bad idea. And B, he made it the opposite of WebOS, where in WebOS you would slide up to get rid of something. An Ice Cream Sandwich, you go horizontally. It's totally different. No, I mean, and I was tweeting out in the middle of this, like, some of this looks familiar. Dan snickering in the background. The thing they based Ice Cream Sandwich on, they based the entire look of the UI around a font that they call Roboto, which coincidentally rhymes with Metro, which is what Windows Phone 7 is.
They kind of based it on a font called Roboto, which is going to go down in history as Google's version of Arial, which is Microsoft's version of Helvetica.
Or Helvetica, yeah. I saw a great site that lets you flip back and forth and show you the difference between Roboto and Helvetica, and damned if I can tell.
I like Droid Sans, but they said it didn't scale, and they thought that Roboto would be more elegant on high-def displays, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't understand the font world. It's a whole... Like, Nokia has their own font that they're going to put on Windows Phone. That's one of the weird customizations they can do. But when you look at it, yeah, it looks a little different, but it's not like... I don't know. It's just strange.
Well, because you get a lot of praise for the Windows Phone 7 font. I mean, people seem to love that.
I love the Metro font. I think that font is awesome.
How do you pronounce it? Sagao? So I forget the pronunciation.
Oh, yeah, I have no idea. I've only seen it written Sago, WP, or something like that.
I think the deal was, Phil, that Apple licenses Helvetica, Microsoft licenses that font, but Android didn't want to get into licensing with an open source system, right? So they made their own.
Makes sense.
So what does Ice Cream Sandwich give? Like, so I have a gingerbread phone. What will Ice Cream Sandwich give me? How will it rock my world?
I don't know. It's just better. It's one more. No, it's so they've upped a whole bunch of features. NFC is going to play a big part here. They have improved the voice to text thing. I mean, we've got posts up the yin yang on this right now. I mean, pick something. Where do you want to start? Because at the same time, you're talking hardware as well as software.
Can we talk about everything that Matthias Duarte stole from WebOS and brought to Android?
Name three things that we stole. That I personally stole. No.
That you personally stole?
My car.
There's let's see here. There is the individually dismissible notifications.
Yes. All right. So that was absolutely stolen.
Multitasking UI, which you just turn sideways.
We've had that for a while.
What?
They pre-stole it.
All right. So it was stolen early.
And the Android beaming, which is essentially just touch to share.
And Derek's designer.
So beaming is done.
And my WebOS guy.
Yeah, beaming is done by NFC. You just touch the two phones together, and it automatically shares whatever it is you're doing. Beaming is what we used to call using infrared, little IR sensor on the old Palm devices, right?
Those are the good old days.
Yeah.
Resizable widgets. The lock screen is cool. How about the face unlock thing? I think that's just going to be a big ball of hurt. But
Kids are going to love that.
I mean,
You see, the key is to, when you set it up, to have a face that's like,
No, the Hello Cupid face. Kevin, are you upset
like...
that people aren't accusing anyone of stealing anything from BlackBerry right now? Are you just waiting for that next year?
I don't think anybody has stolen anything from RIM in a long time.
They're
I'm
going
trying
to
to
next
think.
year.
You know what I want to steal though, and we'll probably talk about iOS 5, Renee, I'm guessing. But I love the new split keyboard on my iPad. It's like a BlackBerry user's dream, basically.
Yeah.
So I really hope we rip that off really good.
One thing that no OS has stolen from RIM directly, but a third-party company or kind of has, it would be, I would say, Kick Messenger and WhatsApp have stolen the BlackBerry Messenger model of.
So is iMessage a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, this was always a big deal. Like I've always had, friends, what I consider youth, using BlackBerries, which always threw me off because I was like, it's a business device. Why would you have something so lame? Sorry, but like, I don't know, something that's like when, Android devices are out there and everything, like why are people using it? It's always been BlackBerry messaging is amazing. And it really is a cool system. But now with Kick and WhatsApp doing basically the same thing, especially WhatsApp with the phone number tie-in, and that's cross-platform, it's sort of sucking the wind, I think, out of the necessity. It's easier for people to get off of BlackBerry Messenger. Now Kick is back on BlackBerry. It's even, becoming more universal.
Yeah, they all kind of suck compared to BBM still, but the thing is people who haven't really used BBM don't know how inferior they kind of feel.
Because you won't license it.
So, yeah, you know what? We asked that question last week at Devcon to some people, who would know. And, one of the guys flatly said, if it's in the works, I have no idea. And he's senior enough, he would know. And I don't think he was lying. And then the other guy, Chris Smith, who's VP of the development platform, he said right now there's nothing, in the works that he's aware of. So, and I, sitting in the room looking at the delivery, and I caught the same people in some questions on other things. So I kind of, had the poker faces figured out. To me, it was legitimately, they were telling the truth. So I don't think there are plans in the near future. Even though we saw some leaks recently saying otherwise, which caused quite a lot of fights on the Crackberry team, determining if they're hodgepodge or not.
Those leaks that came from sources who turned out to be inaccurate about other stories, though, Kev, so I'm going to take them with a grain of salt.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's my question for Phil. I got a loaded one for you, Phil.
Yes.
This whole thing is stealing. Should this even be an issue? We just saw this quote from the Steve Jobs book where it said that Android was grand theft of iPhone and that he was going to spend every penny of Apple's then $40 billion to personally hunt you down. And I don't know what he would do at the end of that, but he said thermonuclear war, and then we took your notifications.
I think all you have to do is dates it when Android was born and when the iPhone first came out, and kind of shuts that down. Look, there's no doubt that Jobs and Apple were pissed, right? And pissed that, hey, there's this other popular OS that's not ours. Some of that, I think, is just going to be CEO blowhardiness, and that's exactly the sort of thing I want from a CEO. If that's my CEO, that's what I want them saying. I want them pissed off. I want them pulling guns out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
dude,
realistically,
you had a Trident.
No,
I tried it. Pulling out Trident. And the fanboys do it too. Like, we get accused of stealing like the notifications. You guys get accused of stealing, whatever it was, whatever the flavor of the month was. We steal from Palm, they steal from us. It's like an ongoing internet argument.
I tell you, I updated my wife's iPhone to iOS 5 and was playing with the notification bar because I totally forgot it was there, right? And the action of pulling it down on the iPhone is horrendous compared to Android. It's almost impossible to do. Like, you pull it down and then, wait a couple minutes, go make a sandwich, and then come back and say, oh, hey,
it's to upsell you a 4S, Phil.
I guess, but that doesn't need new hardware to work right. So yeah, look, these things are always going to borrow from each other. We're always going to have
I feel us.
Yeah.
See, Renee, can you open that with Siri? Who needs notification pull downs? Just have Siri
The
talk
thing
to
with
you.
Siri is like it's got all the people kept saying we want widgets on iOS because Android and Nokia for a long time had these beautiful widgets, and Apple, instead of giving them to us because they always want to slightly piss off their user base, is they built these gorgeous, fantastic widgets that only exist in Siri. So Siri can give you a calendar widget, a Wikipedia widget, a Google widget, an anything widget, but only in Siri.
Funny.
And the notification bar looks at like the notifications area there looks really nice. It's just getting to it on an iPhone 4 is painful, and I don't know why. That should not be a hardware thing. You should not need an iPhone 4S to make that smooth.
Mine was pretty fast even on the iPhone 4. Maybe they can sense your googly powers and don't like you.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I mean, so yeah, things are always going to be borrowed. I'm flipping through the highlights again and seeing what's new. Again, a lot of it's back-end stuff.
Is my phone getting it?
What do you have, the Nexus One?
Yeah.
Maybe. We've got a nice list up of our predictions of phones, tablets, and carriers that we think everything's coming to.
Should I get the Galaxy Nexus, Phil? Would you recommend anyone who's waiting to get a ice cream sandwich phone get the Nexus?
I would, and that's something we need to talk about, I think, is Google's new flagship phone is going to be a 4.65-inch device. That's how big the screen is anyway. Now, some of that is taken up with the capacitive buttons that we're used to are now gone. And so that makes a little bit of a difference, but these are big phones, and I have been walking around with my Nexus One again in the past couple days because I just love this thing.
Tiny.
I love the size. It's tiny compared to everything now. I mean, here's a 4.3-inch. I've got a 4.5.
I think Derek's Veer could fit horizontally on that Galaxy Nexus.
Yeah, I mean, here's the old Infuse, right? The 4.5-inch Infuse, and these things are huge.
Oh.
But that's the direction they've gone, and that's the direction they want to go. So we're all just going to have to get used to it.
I'm going to have to love it. So, Derek, speaking of directions and where companies are going, you didn't get bought by HTC. You have not yet been bought by Facebook or Amazon. Why aren't people snapping up WebOS?
I don't know, but if I had to take a guess, I'd say it's because of HP making some sort of ridiculous demands. They paid $1.2 billion for Palm 18 months ago. Actually, not even that. It was 16 months ago. And, they got a pretty decent deal then. And right now I think that they are trying to recoup that and more because they want to get as much shareholder value as they can out of it. And it's hard to say how much they can get out of it. They might as well just call it quits and sell it off for what they can get out of it and let somebody else do something with it. At the very least, they've decided not to spin off the personal systems group, which is the part that makes computers. They've decided a lobotomy is not what's needed, which is always a good thing. Still, the question remains, who could possibly buy WebOS? I mean, there might be negotiations going on right now, and just with, say, carrier negotiations, they can't say anything until it's settled. So they might be talking to various companies. We just had a rumor come out yesterday from Clayton Morris. His track record on WebOS stuff is a little iffy, but we're going to go with it anyway. And he said that of the companies being rumored to be in serious discussions are HTC, Amazon, LG, and Nikon.
Nikon.
Which I went, Nikon.
I have a 50mm WebOS.
Yeah. Now, granted, I would love to have a camera with Nikon, or a camera with Nikon optics would be nice too. A phone with Nikon optics on it, but I can't see Nikon buying an operating system. And HTC has already said no. This is the first time we've even heard LG, which makes me think that Amazon's probably the only person in the running right now, which means they have all the power in this negotiation with HP.
What about Facebook? There were rumors of Facebook. I don't know if it was rumors or it's wishful thinking. Wouldn't Facebook
I think
be a good
it was
fit?
wishful analyst thinking.
Okay.
They were saying Facebook should totally buy a WebOS. They're going to get the mobile operating system, and Zuckerberg's sitting over there going, "What?"
I mean, we need someone who's not Apple, not Google, and not Microsoft. I mean, there is RIM, but we need somebody who's not a giant corporation trying to force people down their pipes. And WebOS was always that. It was like the elegant alternative. It was Palm.
So who would you want?
I want you, Derek. I want Pre-Central to buy it. I think we're getting close to the asking price.
I mean, we have over 8 million readers a month. If we could get everybody to kick in $1,000, I think we're in good shape.
Okay. The question is, after we have that, what do we do with it?
Throw a kick-ass party.
I don't have any manufacturer's contracts. ...
Profit.
I'm thinking no, you got to think more like a James Bond movie. What I would do would be to start like a private military militia, and we would actually invade Apple. We'd go into Mountain View, we'd take out Google's headquarters, we would take out Apple's headquarters, and then basically we'd eliminate the competition, which then would just make WebOS become the most valuable one because it'd be the only one left.
You have to put your pinky at the side of your mouth when you say.
Yeah.
It would take over the world.
So we don't buy it. We just take out the competition, which by default makes WebOS number one.
It's
that is a genius plan. I can see why they're doing so well up at Waterloo.
Only on a Mobile Nations podcast do we find world domination.
There's been, I wouldn't say rumor, but I guess wishful thinking among some of our readers that they open source WebOS, but there are too many proprietary things behind it that they're probably licensed from other groups that they wouldn't be allowed to open source it. And then there's still the question of who would maintain it and who would use it still. And I really don't have any answers.
I think Amazon is not a bad fit though, because they are a web focused company, and Bezos has that single active will aura about him.
Yeah, and he has that. It's not just aura, but it's that sort of Jobsian determination.
Yeah, except for they just poured a bunch of time and money into rolling their own Android thing. So
yeah, and that's what makes me a little skittish about even these Amazon rumors. But they're the only thing that we have to grab onto now. And I'm playing my violin as the ship goes down.
Masters of their own destiny, Phil.
Yeah.
Fine.
With the web base that is WebOS, it could be they just take the user interface and the way that it's all built, and then they can integrate that with their Android ecosystem somehow and roll their own super special brand.
Anything to stop Windows 8 from appearing on any more touchpads.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another rumor that came around. They said they're testing Windows 8 on touchpads within HP, which I guess makes some sense. It is a dual-core ARM8 tablet, but they're not going to sell them with Windows 8 on them.
No, they just don't want to sell tablets. It's so strange.
No, they do.
I have a question. It's a little off topic, but I'm going to throw it out there just because you guys are letting me talk. How do you feel about RIM's reparations of free apps after that service outage?
What?
$100 of free apps, which you do not get to choose. Or
you don't. They look around and said, "All right, what can we do for these guys?" And Michael's like, "No, seriously, what can we do for everybody?" Everybody's standing around. They're like, "Give them free apps that they either have already bought or don't want to use." And what are the apps, Kevin? Tell us what the apps are.
Oh, I need to find the list. Hang on, talk while I find it.
See, this is at least better than that's.
To quote Adam Zeiss, there wasn't one app he actually wanted.
Exactly. It was the most
Angry Balls
thing.
Cut the robe.
I wish, Renee. I wish. No, it was like drive safely.
Was this like 3 + 3 = ham sandwich? Was that the equation that they were working on? Because it's like people wanted money back. They wanted something off their bills or some free service or something.
Well, to me, all it did was it showed how poor App World is for merchandising. In the sense that you can't get $100 of store credit. I mean, that would be awesome, right? Because then at least you could pick what you wanted to buy.
Can't RIM ever copy Apple right? We showed you. You just give them bumpers and they shut up.
I've got the list. I've got the list of at least the first wave of apps. So Sims 3, Bejeweled, so a couple games, Nova, Texas Hold'em Poker 2, Bubble Bash 2, Photo Editor Ultimate, Drive Safely Pro, iSpeech Translator Pro, Drive Safely Enterprise, Nobex Radio, which is pretty good, the premium version,
Shazam Christmas bundle,
Shazam Encore, and Vlingo Plus. Also referred to often as Vlingo, but I think it's Vlingo.
Yeah, that sounds like Vlingo.
See, even when HP screwed up and lowered the price of the touchpad 2 weeks after it was launched, they at least gave people just a credit for apps.
We gave you $100 back when we dropped the iPhone price.
Yeah.
Adam
Just
says
here's some apps that you probably already bought.
Kev, Adam says they should have given free kickstands to everybody.
Yeah, that's true. So we had quite the eventful. I mean, the big news of BlackBerry Devcon 2011 was actually two things. One was the playbook being worn on a gold chain. Really, it's pure awesome.
Boy!
That was super pimp.
I think if RIM sold them with a chain in the box, they probably would have sold 2 million instead of 200,000.
Flavor Flav marketing it alone would have carried them over the top.
And then I'm going to show you the BlackBerry kickstand. So Adam Zeiss, who I usually harp on for not working hard enough, not doing a good enough job on being creative and original editorial and all that stuff, he invented this, which is the BlackBerry kickstand. So all you got to do is take the battery door off your 9900 or 9930, and then kind of put the top piece back in, and it pivots perfectly. And you have a beautiful built-in kickstand.
2011, Crackberry revolutionizes the BlackBerry.
It's really
I love
amazing.
that you're using an iPad as a BlackBerry holder.
Well,
A discontinued orange.
Yes, this is a collector's item smart cover. I don't understand why, Renee. Talk about it. What happened here?
For some reason, today Apple's doing these things lately. They're doing so many product launches that now they were dropping things in press release. New computers via press release. Today they just changed the story. They didn't even announce anything. There were new MacBooks, and suddenly the orange iPad cover was gone, and a dark gray one took its place. And I think it's a personal attack on Crackberry. I do. I think it's a personal attack on Crackberry. I can't believe they did this. I'm distraught on your behalf, Kevin.
And honestly, the way I justified buying an iPad 2, I was like, well, at least the cover's orange, so I feel okay about that,
Yeah.
But now I feel dirty.
I know. But no, it's a collector's item now. You're going to be one of you and Bengals fans will be
Woohoo!
the last of the... It was an interesting week for Apple, too, because they had one of the single largest software drops in history recently, where they put out iOS 5, a new version of Lion, a new version of all the apps to tie into iCloud. There were so many things coming out that they literally broke the internet. They did not tell ISPs. ISPs started going down. Servers started going down. Authentication started going down. It was the same kind of cluster frack that we knew and loved from the Mobile Me release of years past. And they followed it up with iPhone 4S, which a lot of mainstream tech, a lot of tech bloggers decided was a fail update, and then it went on to sell 4 million handsets in one weekend.
That's such a failure.
It's ridiculous. It turns out that people actually, will buy iPhones. Some people said it was because, it's the Apple sheep. They'll buy anything. Or some people said it's because Jobs passed away and they bought it in memoriam of Steve Jobs. But I think that, Apple does a different strategy. They put out one phone. You got to wait a year, in this case, 16 months for it. And there was pent up demand. And they sold a bunch of them.
Or it's actually a pretty decent phone.
Or
even not even pretty decent. It's a really good phone, even maybe a great phone.
It is. We did our review. We finally got our review up on Monday. And if you have an iPhone 4, it is not a terribly compelling update unless the antenna is giving you problems. You're a huge photographer and you want that 8 megapixel giant backlit sensor, 5 glass wide camera, which is...
Please don't bring up the megapixels.
Apple's
That
doing this
doesn't
right,
matter.
though, Phil. No, Apple's doing this right because they didn't go for megapixels. They went for the size of the sensor. A lot of companies will make megapixels get big by cutting the sensor smaller. Then all you have is a crappy sensor with too many megapixels.
But that's not what you said. The first thing you said was 8 megapixels. You didn't say bigger sensor.
Yes, big. It's got a big, fat, giant horse of a sensor on it.
Oh my!
It shoots 1080p video.
Wow.
Good low light, and it's got this thing called Siri, which is Apple bought Siri. Siri is basically, some people think it's just like Vlingo or just like Nuance, and it does license Nuance technology. But the breakthrough with Siri was their natural language parsing engine on the back, so it understands context. If I start talking about Kevin and I say something later, it remembers that I'm talking about Kevin. Or if I tell it that Phil is my Android daddy, and then later I say, remind me to call my Android daddy when I get home. The minute I get home, Siri will pop up Phil's number ready to dial. And they gave it, and this is the thing that reminded me of some of the stuff we were discussing earlier, Derek. They didn't rename it. Apple usually renames things. They left it called Siri, and they gave it an almost Pixar-like personality that's almost engaging.
I love it.
like you can just hit the button. Siri, will you marry me?
Let's just be friends, okay?
It does, and it does all these things so neatly. Like, Siri, remind me to call Kevin Michaluk when I get home.
Which phone number for Kevin Mikalski?
It doesn't like your last name, Kevin.
Here's your reminder for when you get home.
And I am actually in the car driving, dictating 5 or 6 paragraph long emails to Kevin or to Phil, and it gets almost as many words right as I do when I'm typing with damn you autocorrect. So I think this is one of those things where, like, like Phil mentioned before, you want the CEOs have been taking swipes at it, saying it's not useful. But I think that's like when Steve Jobs said nobody wants video on an iPod, or when he said bad things about Android. It means that this time next year we're all going to have very similar voice control on our phones.
Probably. And Android has been really good for a long time. It does sort of a different thing. It's not trying, and I think we've all seen the post by now, where Andy Rubin says, he doesn't want your phone to be your assistant. He wants to be a tool that you use. And, you shouldn't be talking to your phone like Renee's doing here. And that's an interesting philosophy. I understand why Apple's going in one direction and Android kind of takes the other more engineering approach to it. I'm kind of inclined to go with the latter. I mean, I don't think you should be talking to your phone like it's I think there's a happy medium to be found there. So you're not just doing like Android, create event, schedule event,
make you sound like a machine.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to have snarky conversations with a Star Trek computer.
That's it. That was the essence of my review, is that Siri is not perfect. It makes mistakes. It can drive you crazy. But it's the first time I've actually felt like I was in Star Trek. I mean, that Google app for iOS did that a while ago. You could pick it up to your ear and talk to it, and it would find things for you. And Siri is limited compared to Google's implementation. Like, Google can open apps and do all sorts of more functional things. But just little things like holding this down. Phil loves you.
I don't know what you mean by still loves you.
See, that kind of stuff, it will drive you nuts, just like an autocorrect or like a typewriter, but it gets better as you learn it. And I think we're all going to have this soon.
Maybe.
Speak for yourself. I don't know if I'm going to have anything soon.
Oh.
I'm going to switch my little playbook here to be a sad face for Derek.
All right.
Oh, thank you. Now you're just making me feel bad.
Kevin, where can we find out more about you?
You can head to crackberry.com, where I try to do a lot of writing. You can also follow me on the Twitter at crackberrykevin, possibly at aboutme/crackberrykevin, and on Mobile Nations. And I recommend people really keep it locked to what we're doing, because we got a lot of awesome stuff that we'll be announcing soon.
Woo!
Hooray.
Phil, where can we find out more about you, sir?
AndroidCentral.com. At Android Central, at Phil Nickinson on Google+. I appear at the Apollo on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And
We love you, Phil.
It's amazing.
Ow!
That's it.
Derek,
With or without your clothes on?
Whichever you prefer.
Ooh.
how about you, Derek?
You can find me on precentral.net. You can also find me on Twitter at DKDSGN or at precentral. And I think I'm on Google Plus somewhere, Derek Kessler.
And you're going to be on Iterate with us tonight. Thank you for that.
Yes, I am. Hey.
Talking WebOS design.
Yes.
You can find Dan at WP Central, on Twitter at WP Central, or at Malatesta77. He's also probably on your Xbox Lives, snipering you from a very far away distance. But check out WPCentral.com. And you can find me at Renee Ritchie. You can find me at Tippy. I am available to you on Twitter, on Google+. It's almost always the same username. I am Captain Default for a reason. You can also find all of us at Mobile Nations, mobilenations.com. You can email us at podcast@mobilenations.com, or leave a reply on the show when it goes live on all the network sites. We are here every 2 weeks, bringing together the heads of state of Android, BlackBerry, WebOS, Windows Phone, and iOS. And if you haven't already, please go to iTunes. Please subscribe to this. And very soon, Kevin, the video stream will be live.
Right on. That's what I want.
Yeah, we're getting all the video streams up this
Nice.
week. You'll be able to get it from iTunes, RSS, and we're going to put it. Phil told me he personally is going to insert it into every Android client on the world.
Cool.
Nice. See you in 2 weeks, folks. Kevin out.
Take care. Kevin out.
Mobile Nation
I'm off to
out.
a Winnipeg Jets game.
End of line.
Still halfway naked, actually.
Thank you.
That's Phil's shtick.
I'm living the blogger life. What do you want?
Pants? Who needs pants?
They're internet
You gotta
fans.
afford 'em.